Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Mignot. This is part of my 29 Days of Magic series where I interview an amazing Black woman every single day for 29 straight days. And today, I am super delighted to have Tiffany Dufu, who's the president of the Tory Burch Foundation and a published author. She has an incredible story, and I cannot wait for you all to hear it. Take a listen. Hey, Tiffany, how are you?
I'm amazing. Thank you for having me, Laura.
I'm so delighted that we were able to make this work. So, jumping right in, first question is always the same. Answers are always wonderful. I'm sure yours would be no different. So, Tiffany, what was your first job?
Well, I have two answers to the question. I feel like my first job that was pivotal was as a Girl Scout cookie seller. I'm a lifetime Girl Scout. And so I learned very early in life how to promote my ideas and pitch my wells and sell my wares. So I was an entrepreneur very early, though I later did not think of myself as one. And then the first, like paying job that I had was as a telemarketer, which
Ooh.
I hated. I hated that job. It was a temp job and it was the most well-paying job I could get out of college. I had recently gotten married and we didn't have that much money. And I went to the temp agency and it was the highest paying job. And I hated it because I spent all day calling people who did not want to be called. But it turned out to be a very useful job because I learned that people could say no to you over and over and over again and the world doesn't fall apart.
I love that. I have to say honestly, 350 odd episodes of this podcast over 7 years and change. I always ask this as the first question. And without fail, every job that people kind of reference back to always plays a role in what's ended up happening in their career and where they are right now. And so it's so wonderful to see because, like, yeah, you learn so many key lessons from that very first job, and it comes in so handy throughout your career.
You really do.
It's pretty awesome. So, okay, we go from being a telemarketer, which we cannot stand, to where we are right now. What has that career journey been like?
Oh, it's been rewarding and magical and topsy-turvy. My life's work is advancing women and girls. That's pretty much why I wake up every morning. And as a result of that, soon after being a telemarketer, I realized that I needed a livelihood that really fueled my passion and my purpose. So that was another good outcome of having your first job being a telemarketer. And pretty much since then, every job that I've had, every dollar I've donated, every board I've sat on, every book I've written or contributed to is pretty much focused on how we harness women and girls' talent and ingenuity. So I think, what I am most appreciative of about my journey is that I've pretty much, for the most part, been handed from woman to woman. I helped to get a girls' school off the ground in Seattle. That's my hometown. It's called Seattle Girls School. And while I was there, a woman on the board pulled me aside after a board meeting. And, she says to me, Tiffany, you're really smart and you work hard, but you don't seem to know anything about raising money. And that was my job. Like I was hired to raise money for the school. She says,
Oh, damn.
do
She said,
you
"You
want
know
to
what you're
learn?
doing?"
Yeah, she says, but do you want to learn? And fortunately, I had, good enough parents that I was like, yes, ma'am, I'd like to learn. And it turned out that this woman's name was Janie Williams. And I have to just give a shout out to her. She's no longer with us, but she's a very prominent philanthropist in Seattle. Her father was the architect that built the Space Needle in Seattle. The School of Public Affairs at the University of Washington is named after him. And she certainly followed in his footsteps. And she basically showed me the ropes. She says to me, listen, in a few days, I'm going to have a meeting with a prospective donor. I want you to meet me, wear a suit, wear something nice. Don't say anything during the meeting. I'm going to teach you how to raise money. And I showed up and she introduced me by saying, this is Tiffany. She's a superstar. She's here to learn how to raise money. And I spent the next 6 months basically listening to her and observing her through modeling, just learning how to listen, how to get in tune and in touch with people's incentives and motives and their passion and purpose, and fundamentally how to ask, for what you need on behalf of the causes that you cared about. But either way, when I was moving to Boston a few years later, she said, when you get to Boston, go look up Lois Lindauer and you tell Lois Lindauer that Janie sent you, which I did. And that's how I got a job raising money at Simmons University, which is a women's college in Boston. And I'm now on the board of Simmons many years later after that experience. When I went from Boston to New York, Lois said, when you get to New York, go find Marie Wilson and tell her that I sent you. I said, okay. So when I got to New York, I went and found Marie Wilson. She had built the Ms. Foundation for women. She had started Take Our Daughters to Work Day, and she had recently started a new nonprofit called the White House Project that was committed to training women to run for political office. And I found Marie. I said, listen, Lois sent me. I like your work. I know how to raise money. She was like, you're hired. So
There we go. I mean, you said the
yeah,
magic words,
yeah,
raise money.
yeah, yeah. So I worked for Marie for 6.5 years and eventually ran the White House Project when she retired. And it's just been an incredible journey, ever since then. But I could go on every single thing that I've done outside of just starting my own company. But even then, I had a lot of support from women in my community and my network. And my first investor was a woman. So I just feel that I really owe a debt of gratitude to women who have supported me and nurtured me and given me opportunity all along the way.
And it's lovely to see that it was women along the way who were like, hey, come with me. Hey, let me get you into these rooms because it's so necessary. And I think sometimes folks forget their impact. And you shouting out those amazing women who were along the way gave you, opened the door, invited you in, gave you an opportunity to learn are so important. And I think oftentimes we forget, like, oh yeah, like I did do that. I did like invite her into that meeting. I just thought it was the right thing to do. So it's such a beautiful thing to see. So what's your day to day now at like the Tory Burch Foundation?
So the Tory Burch Foundation, I say because it's so amazing. Especially as an entrepreneur myself, the Tory Burch Foundation is very focused on increasing women's economic power through entrepreneurship. And we run a fellows program where we identify women entrepreneurs who are early, in their journey. And our first goal is to get them past the $1 million mark in revenue. The vast majority of women-owned businesses, as you probably know, Laura, as an entrepreneur yourself, never get past the million
Hmm.
dollar mark. And we're doing that at 10 times the national average. So, as someone who is an entrepreneur myself, before this, I spent 5 years building a tech company called The Crew. I know how challenging it is to put your ideas out into the world, to go to market, to build an audience, to build your acquisition funnel, to grow your consumer base, and ultimately, as you did, to exit. And right now, there's just no other group of people I would rather lay my body on the table for than a woman entrepreneur. I don't
Amazing.
think that most Americans understand the role that small business plays in our economy. Over 90% of business in America is small business, and it really does fuel our economy. Part of the reason why we are where we are in our nation is because the promise of economic opportunity that we all feel entitled to has not been available to the vast majority of us. And the levers that we used to use to increase economic mobility, primarily being one, wealth transfer, which most people never had access to. Number two, home ownership, which I'm old enough to have bought a home in my 20s with my husband. That's completely unheard of
I
now.
was just gonna, that doesn't happen anymore. No one
No,
does
it
that.
doesn't happen anymore. Number three is retirement savings, which I won't go into why that's blown up. And the fourth lever is entrepreneurship. It's really the last lever of just economic opportunity where you can really create value for yourself, for your family. And it's why it's so important that we support small business and that we support entrepreneurs. And it's the one thing that Americans, despite the divisiveness, actually agree on. According to last year's Pew Research, over 80% of Americans feel that small business is good for our nation and that entrepreneurs are people that we should support. So I'm full steam ahead in supporting these women with growing their businesses, hiring people, creating inclusive work cultures, and really helping us all to lift all boats.
What you're doing is saving the world. I think we're at a very unique time in February 2025 in America, and programs that are focusing on helping women get to the next level are needed now more than ever. So, one, thanks for doing the work you're doing. Two, question for you. Obviously, we are in February 2025. Things are a little unusual. Best way I can say it. Yeah, unusual. How have you all responded to, a lot of, impacts on what's been happening with DEI programs, or are you all, very much heads down trying to make the best of what you're doing without paying attention to the noise outside?
Hmm. Well, here's the first thing I'll say. Women having economic power makes a huge difference. I work for a company that was founded by a woman. She's still here in the building every day. And because she's built a global empire, she's able to steward, her resources to continue this work. I mean, if there's any example of the importance of women's economic power, it's what's happening at the Tory Burch Foundation right now. I think that we're doing our best to support our entrepreneurs that are impacted by what's happening, first of all. Some of them are, particularly if they have government contracts, some are not necessarily, but we've been here long before this administration. We're in the 10th year of our fellows program. And right now I'm focused on scaling the work. So we're a bit insulated and that we're definitely continuing, full steam ahead. But that does not mean that we are not fielding crisis and challenges from the women entrepreneurs that we serve. And that's what I'm really committed to, is making sure that they still have access to the community and the capital and education that they need to move their companies forward.
Awesome, and so glad you all are able to do that because it seemed I think folks seem to misunderstand that like we're all interconnected. And there are businesses that touch other industries that you wouldn't even think of because, hey, they do XYZ. Why would that ever be related to the government? Like, well, actually, there's a reason how it is. And so, as a result of that, it's so important for people to understand and one, also just have some empathy for like the unusual and traumatic circumstances that we're all in.
Absolutely.
So, talk to me about a time as an entrepreneur or in any way, shape, or form of your career where you had a challenge and you're like, there's no way I'm going to figure this out. And then you did.
Hmm. So I have, as you could probably tell from my story, a little bit of a different relationship to challenges. And I had what I call a Tiffany's epiphany. Um,
Okay.
Many years ago in listening to women's stories because I'm obsessed with listening to women and understanding what drives the decisions that they make. And I used to meet with women every Tuesday and Thursday at 9, 10, and 11 a.m. I'm not able to do that as frequently anymore, but for years I did this. So I've listened to hundreds of stories. And I had one of my Tiffany's epiphanies. Other people call them aha moments, but it's just my little name for it, when it hit me that even though we have a lot of people around us, we have family, we have friends, we have coworkers, that women often psychologically approach their personal and professional journey as if it's a solo endeavor, meaning that when we have that challenge, often the first question we're asking ourselves is, how am I going to solve this challenge? And my Tiffany's epiphany was that I don't really, that's not the first question that I ask myself. I realized that in listening to so many other women ask this question, the first question I think is important to ask when you have a challenge is not how am I going to solve it, but who's going to help me solve it. That's how I approach challenges because I've had so many people in my life help me solve challenges that I've realized it's so much more effective, it's so much more productive, it's so much more psychologically healthy because one, there's no problem or challenge that you are having that someone else hasn't already had before. There's no new challenges under the sun, which means that we're not alone in those challenges. And mind you, I'm the oldest of four girls, and my youngest sister has told me, Tiffany, you're so boring. You never want to learn a lesson yourself, because I'm happy. I'm happy to just sit at the feet of, someone else and have them show me the ropes. I found that community, whether that community is your church community, whether it's a mentorship community, whether it's peer groups, whether it's your friends, however you find the community, reaching out to others when you have that challenge, articulating to them what you think the challenge is in the best way that you can. Or if it's a challenge where you're just on your bathroom floor in tears, just sending a text message that says, I'm on the bathroom floor in tears, help.
Yes.
It will always lead to breakthrough more effectively than you trying to do it on your own.
Oh my God, yes. I spent a decade being an entrepreneur, and I think I learned this similarly the hard way. It's just like, if you want to go slow, go it alone. If you want to go fast, go with others.
Preach.
And like, I think especially as Black women, there's this horrible misconception that we are from Krypton. So we're super women and that we can just do all this stuff on our own and carry all this stuff on our backs. And, part of the reason I love doing this series is to remind folks that like this is not a solo journey. You have got to have community, you've got to have other folks who are there to help you. And it is okay, it's beyond okay. It is the norm to ask for help.
Someone recently said, well, can't remember right now where I heard it, but I'll never, it's like you hear something once and you never forget it. It is that we don't build trust by offering help. We build trust by asking for it.
Amen. Just ask. Like I said, I remember when I first, it's interesting. This second go around of entrepreneurship is a whole other, it's completely different. Obviously, I've got 10 years of experience, but like, I just see that when I first started, how I just approached the world of like, okay, I just gotta figure this all out. And it's like one thing by myself, D, 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 D. Now it's like, okay, so yeah, this is not something I can do. So who do I know who can do this? Who could I bring into this conversation? But it takes a lot of unlearning, I think, especially for our elder millennial, later Gen Xer cohort of folks to understand that no, it's cool to do this. It's actually an imperative.
Oh, for sure.
So, knowing you are obviously very busy working with all these amazing fellows to helping them get to their first million, what does Tiffany do for Tiffany? Like, what do you do for your self-care?
Oh, I have a lot. How much time do we have? Okay, so let's start with music. When I was a little girl, I used to spend countless hours in my room listening to cassette tapes, ripping the songs off of the radio, as we used to do,
Young folks may
rewinding
not know what
them.
that means, but I remember. I had a
Yeah.
ghetto blaster in my room too.
Yes, and dancing and dancing and dancing and dancing. And I remember thinking as a child, I don't know if I ever want to grow up because I don't see adults just dancing nonstop. I've never outgrown it, Laura. I still put on my Beats headset every day
Awesome.
and I dance. Last night, I basically took myself to church. I was listening to this Fred Hammond like Spotify playlist, but the night
Oh,
before it was Lemonade. The night before it was Janet Jackson's Control. I spend a lot of time just really I think I'm just de-stressing or something by dancing. So that's number one, every day, all day, no matter where I am in the world. I also am obsessed with lavender oil. I have it in my bag, I have it in my drawer, and multiple times a day, I take lavender oil, I put it on my wrists, and then I take 3 deep breaths in and out. And regardless of what's happening, I just feel like it brings me back to the center. I get my beverages first thing. I have like different waters and I prep them at the beginning of the day because I find if I don't do that, I don't hydrate myself throughout the day. I really love my yoga practice. I'm not a big yogi. It's like Adrian with yoga, from on of online. But I love moving my body and stretching. It feels really good, especially now that I've turned 50 and I can't do the high impact workouts. I could go on and on. It just every day I'm trying to, in these small micro ways, really nurture myself. And in the big ways, I travel with my girlfriends. I was just in Miami last weekend with my girlfriends. In a couple of weeks, I'm in Anguilla with my girlfriends. I do a lot of gallivanting with my girls.
You listen. I love gallivanting.
Yes.
Because that's my favorite word. Like I have Jamaican parents, and so like I heard the word gallivanting all my life. So I fully agree with you, and it's the perfect way of explaining that. Like, yes, I'm just going to wander aimlessly about, but gallivant when I do it.
Yes.
Fabulous. What is the lavender oil? Because I think we'd love to drop it in the show notes for folks.
Oh, so I can never pronounce the name of this company that makes this lavender oil. It's a French company, but I'll get it. You can put it in like the chat. It's a French company.
Fabulous, because folks, I have heard so many folks say that like they use some sort of lavender oil as a calming balm, or they spray it on their pillow. I've never actually tried it, so I'm always down to find things that will calm me the hell down.
I want to see that that it serves as an aphrodisiac. I don't know if that's true, but
Hey, listen, we out here, Tiffany. So,
yeah.
uh, yeah, definitely send that to me because yeah. Looking back on all the amazing things that you've done, what do you think you'd tell 18-year-old Tiffany?
Mm. Well, I tell her what my mom used to tell me every day, but that despite the fact she did that, I find myself at different times in my life forgetting, which is that, Tiffany, you're so smart, you're so beautiful, you're so loved, and you don't need to do anything to prove any of those things. You're already that.
Love that. Yeah, I think that's a thing we sometimes forget. Like, you're already here.
Yeah,
Y'all are already here.
yeah.
Like, you don't have to be Superwoman. You're
No.
already fabulous in your own right. And, doing these interviews for 29 days is always so refreshing. And I call it a love letter to Black women because I think we just forget we're here, therefore we're awesome. Period.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. My theme song for this month is Tina Turner's We Don't Need Another Hero.
I saw Tina Turner perform that song at Nassau
Oh,
Coliseum with my mom when I was really little. It was the first concert I ever went to. Like I'm spoiled. Like the first concert I ever went to was Tina Turner. And remember when she had the big arm out in the stage that she would go out into the stage and I got to see like her like kind of close singing that song. And so that brought back an amazing memory.
you
Thank you.
have a really amazing mom. Is she still with us?
Yeah, she is.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh yeah, I have the world's greatest mom.
yeah, you do. You do.
Like, oh yeah, I was her date for all of because my dad hates concerts. So I've seen Tina Turner. I saw Luther Vandross and Diana Ross multiple times, and Emperor Tom Jones. And because I was always her, and of course Diana Ross at least 10 times. I've seen Diana
Oh
Ross.
my God. Okay, I
Uh,
want to be your mom's daughter.
say, listen, hey, she's the only one she got. So, but that song, yes, we don't need another hero. And I think, especially at this moment that we're all in, understanding that we don't need to be anybody's other hero other than one for ourselves.
For sure.
So, question for you. Do you have a give and or an ask of the audience? Because this can be anything from some great advice, a book you've read, or a phrase you're saying, anything you want.
Oh, there's so many.
Hmm.
One of the things that my parents taught me is that if you want something you've never had before, you're going to have to do something that you've never done before in order to get it. So my ask, my request is that you think about what it is that you want to accomplish or achieve or feel or do that you've never done before. And just think about one tiny thing today that you could do to take a step in that direction that you've never done before.
I love that. That's great, but that's fantastic. Tiffany, you just dropped in all the gems. And now, last question for you. What's one thing that brings you joy?
Oh, my family. My family. I once watched a documentary on happiness, and I watched the whole documentary because I wanted to know what they were going to tell me was the key to happiness. And eventually, at the end of the documentary, they did
Good
get to
plan.
it.
Good plan. Solid
They
plan.
did. And there were two things. One thing was unexpected, which was it was your capacity or ability to embrace conflict. Turns out that people who put things under the rug, who can't embrace conflict, end up with a lot of residual unhappiness. But the other was that your happiness is largely determined by the quality of the relationships with the people who are closest to you. And I feel so fortunate that despite all of my insecurities, all of my faults, all of my flaws, that I have a family that adores me and thinks I'm amazing and gives me lots of grace. I'm so grateful to them, especially because two of them are teenagers and I still get the grace from them. And that's hard to do when you're a teenager.
The teenagers, yes. Well, they think you know everything, obviously.
Yes, yes.
Because they do. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love this. Tiffany, you are just delightful, absolutely delightful. And, I love what you're doing and how you're approaching it. I get at this very unique moment that we're in. It's women like you who are in the trenches with the founders, helping them grow, helping them scale, helping them know that it's going to be all right. Is so imperative to the world we're in right now to help us get through these unprecedented times. I would kill for some precedented times, but it's the work is so necessary. And thank you so much for being part of 29 Days of Magic and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me and for producing this, Laura. We all need it.
Awesome, thanks. And so we'll put all details in the show notes for folks to connect with you, find out the name of that lavender oil, and just keep the conversation going. And that is our show.